Welcome to Wealthfinity. Are you tired of living paycheck to paycheck and want to take control of your finances? One of the biggest expenses for many people is their rent. In this channel, we'll be diving into the topic of understanding how much rent can afford. From calculating your monthly income to understanding the different expenses that come with renting, we've got you covered. Join us on the journey to financial stability and let's get started on figuring out your rental budget today. Rent is one of the largest expenses in most people's budgets, and it's important to know how much of your income should go towards it. The general rule of thumb is that you should spend no more than 30% of your income on housing expenses, including rent and utilities. This percentage is known as the housing expense ratio, and is widely used by financial experts to determine if a person's housing expenses are manageable. However, the 30% rule is not a hard and fast rule and can vary depending on various factors such as your location, income, and overall financial situation. If you live in an area with a high cost of living, you may need to allocate more of your income towards rent. On the other hand, if you have a lower income or a large amount of debt, you may need to allocate less of your income towards rent. When determining how much of your income should go towards rent, it's important to take into account other expenses as well. By budgeting responsibly and keeping your housing expenses within a manageable range, you can enjoy a comfortable home while still being able to reach your other financial goals. These expenses can include food, transportation, insurance, healthcare, and entertainment. You should aim to have enough money left over after paying all your expenses to save for emergencies, pay off debt, or put into savings for future goals like retirement or a down payment on a home. To determine the right housing expense ratio for you, start by calculating your gross income, your total income before taxes, and then subtract all your monthly expenses. This will give you a good idea of how much you can afford to spend on rent. If you find that your housing expenses are too high, you can consider looking for a cheaper rental, sharing a place with roommates, or downsizing to a smaller place. Determining how much rent you can afford can seem like a daunting task, but with a few key steps, you can find a budget-friendly living situation that works for you. Here are some tips to help you figure out how much rent you can afford. Calculate your monthly income. Your monthly rent should not exceed 30% of your gross monthly income. To determine your gross monthly income, add up your pre-tax earnings from all sources, salary, bonuses, investment income, etc. Factor in other monthly expenses. Make sure to consider all of your monthly expenses, including utilities, transportation costs, food, and entertainment, when determining how much rent you can afford. A general rule of thumb is to limit your housing expenses to no more than 50% of your monthly budget. Take into account one-time expenses. Don't forget about any one-time expenses, such as moving costs or security deposits, that you'll need to pay before you move in. These expenses can add up quickly, so it's important to factor them into your budget. Consider your savings. How much savings you have is also important when figuring out how much rent you can afford. If you have a large emergency fund, you may be able to afford a higher rent payment. However, if you have limited savings, it's important to keep your rent at a level that won't strain your budget. Get a roommate. Splitting rent with a roommate can be a great way to save money. Just be sure to consider all the factors, lifestyle, habits, etc., that could affect your roommate relationship before making a decision. Calculating how much rent you can afford. When it comes to renting a new apartment or house, it's important to determine how much rent you can afford before you start your search. Knowing your budget will help you avoid overspending, and prevent you from getting into financial trouble down the road. Here are some steps to help you determine the amount of rent you can afford. Step 1. Determine your income. The first step in calculating your rental budget is to determine your monthly income. This should include all sources of income, including your salary, bonuses, and any additional sources of income. Be sure to take into account any deductions from your pay, such as taxes, health insurance, and retirement contributions. Step 2. Calculate your monthly expenses. The next step is to calculate your monthly expenses. This includes all of your recurring bills, such as rent, utilities, groceries, transportation costs, and any other expenses you may have. You should also include any debt payments you make each month, such as credit card bills, car payments, and student loans. Step 3. Subtract your expenses from your income. Once you have determined your monthly income and expenses, subtract your expenses from your income to find out how much money you have left over each month. This will give you a good idea of how much you can afford to spend on rent each month. Step 4. Consider other factors. There are other factors to consider when determining how much rent you can afford. For example, you should take into account the cost of moving, such as the cost of a moving truck, deposits, and first and last month's rent. You may also want to consider how much you have saved for emergencies, and whether you have any long-term financial goals, such as saving for a down payment on a house or investing in a retirement fund. Step 5. Decide on a budget. Finally, after considering all of these factors, decide on a budget for your monthly rent. Be sure to factor in any increases in rent, and make sure you have enough money left over each month to cover other expenses and save for the future. In conclusion, understanding how much rent you can afford is a crucial step in finding your perfect home. By considering your income, expenses, and credit score, you can determine a budget that works for you. Keep in mind that you want to leave room for savings, emergencies, and other financial priorities. Renting within your budget will help ensure that you are able to enjoy your new home without financial stress.